Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to, well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. If worrying is impacting your quality of life, you are going to find great relief in what I'm talking to you about today. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, your host. I am a professional speaker in schools and in workplaces, also the co-author of Anxious Kids and the author of Anxious Mums. Today, we are talking about worrying. Everybody worries, okay? Everybody worries, but for some, it's such a constant part of life that it has a significant impact on day-to-day functioning and can really detract from relationships and from productivity and from happiness, life satisfaction, and really finding those beautiful glimmers in every single day. It can actually make life really miserable. And that was me for a long time. In my childhood, I had a head full of so many worries, hence my diagnosis of generalised anxiety disorder. And it was really tough for my mum because she was the one that was there having to kind of convince me each day that the things that I was worrying about weren't going to be a problem. It would relieve my worry for a little while, sharing them with mum and her telling me it's going to be okay, but soon enough my head would be filled again. It made it really hard to sleep, made it really hard if I woke up in the night to get back to sleep, and I'm sure many of you can relate. We all have personal worries that are unique to us and our particular circumstances and our temperament and our relationships and our work, but what's interesting is that we also have a lot of common worries. And these include things like finances and money, particularly in this current climate where we have a housing crisis and a cost of living crisis here in Australia. We worry a lot about the future and the planet, job security, relationships, health, our own and that of others, the people we love and care about. And if we're parents, we worry about our kids. It's been said that we are as happy as our least happy kid, and if our kid's really worried about something, whether they're little or they're bigger or they're teenagers or even they're adults, it can really detract and cause us a lot of worry and concern as well. By definition, worry is a mental process that often contains unrealistic content. We give it a lot of time, we give it a lot of energy, and perhaps after our conversation today, it's just you and me, by the way. I'm recording this solo because I came across some really fantastic research and I wanted to bring it to your attention. And so it is something that often contains unrealistic content, and the research I'm sharing with you today really speaks to that. So worry is the primary criterion for generalised anxiety disorder. So what that means is people with generalised anxiety disorder are thought to continually expect unreasonable or exaggerated negative future events, okay, regardless of their improbability. It's also worth adding that worry is a feature of other types of anxiety as well, whether or not that's a phobia or a social anxiety or other types of anxiety. Worry can absolutely feature regularly and in ways that are really debilitating. So I wonder how you're going with your worry. I wonder whether or not just listening to this episode, you are able to start to reflect on how much time you spend worrying, the content of what it is you're worrying about. Are there themes in what you worry about? And how intrusive is it? How much of your time is it taking up? How much is it taking you away from what's in front of you? And how much distress is it causing you? It's quite incredible, isn't it, the way that we can be in a moment somewhere feeling relaxed and we can have one thought that generates this sort of domino effect of physiological changes in our body, and we can feel sick and we can be fast forwarded to a future that's awful, frightening, maybe dangerous or really upsetting and distressing purely because of the content of our thoughts. And a lot of us were raised to think and believe that we could control what we think. You know, we can to a certain extent. If we think, I'd really love to get a packet of salt and vinegar chips on the way home from work today and just munch away on them in the car home, we might go, yeah, okay, well, I'm having that thought. That's an urge, and recognise, hey, I'll get home, start making dinner, or have a smoothie, have something a little bit healthier, and we can kind of move on from that idea around buying the salt and vinegar chips or whatever it is that is your vice It's not really salt, vinegar chips for me. It would always be chocolate. You understand what I'm trying to say. So we can move on from some thoughts, but a lot of worries are just so ever-present and they really get in the way. They absolutely can derail our day and take away from a lot of the pleasure that's available for us. And that's why I wanted to share with you some research that has been published. It was published in 2020, and the research was conducted by a couple of researchers called Lucas Lafreniere and Michelle Newman at the Pennsylvania State University. The title of the paper will give away what it is I want to say to you today. Exposing Worries Deceit, Percentage of Untrue Worries in Generalised Anxiety Disorder Treatment. So the researchers really wanted to look at what was the common percentage of untrue worries per person in this particular research project that they were running. And it's really important because when we worry a lot about things, one of the things that can help us a lot is when we've had history of the same worry and also experience with that worry proving to be untrue. And I'll give you an example. You might perhaps have a new relationship in your life, perhaps a new friendship or a new romantic relationship. And when you message that person, you might not hear back straight away. And you can start to worry, what have I done? What does this mean? What's the future of this relationship? And start to fast forward to those kind of really dismal future kind of outcomes. And then a couple of days later, you'll get a reply back where the person says, I'm so sorry, I've been away or I've been swamped or my phone died or something happened. And over months, you begin to learn that the cadence of replying with this particular person isn't perhaps what you would like, but you know that this person always comes back to you and always replies and there's never a problem. And so that experience over time of that worry being untrue helps the next time it pops up for you to say, well, this has happened before. It's never been a problem. Why should it be a problem now? Knowing the percentage of untrue worries in a research population, I think is really powerful. So I want to tell you about the research and what the researchers did. They recruited a whole group of people and they asked them to complete what's called a worry outcome journal. The worry outcome journal was a pen and paper based journal and everybody was trained in how to use it. And essentially what people were asked to do was to write down a worry or any thoughts that had been problematic in the 2 hours before they were prompted to make a note, to rate on a scale of 1, no distress, no problem, no, interference, through to 7, highly stressful, highly interfering with what I was doing. That's also being recorded in the journal. And they asked the participants also to make a prediction as to the likelihood of what they were worrying about coming true. Now, when it comes to the recording of the worries, participants were prompted 4 times a day at random times. They knew to expect a prompt via text message in the morning, in the early afternoon, in the late afternoon, and in the evening, but they were prompted at random times within those kind of intervals. So this went on for 10 days, and every one of the participants, with the exception of one, completed all of these tasks. One pulled out because she found it too uncomfortable to be sort of paying attention to her worries and writing them down. Okay, and that's understandable. What the researchers then did was they looked at the accuracy of the predictions made by the participants. And this is where we get to the findings. I want you to really pay close attention to what I'm about to say. So the analysis was conducted and averaged across all participants, 91.4% of worries did not come true. Okay, I'll say that again. 91.4% of all their worries did not come true. So that means more than 9 out of 10 worries were untrue. And that's not all. Of the 8.6% of worries that did come true, a third of those had a better outcome than predicted. Let's put it like this. Of all the worries that these people had, 9 out of 10 of them didn't come true. Of the 1 out of 10 that did come true, a third of those had a better outcome than expected. So what the researchers also found was that the number of unique worries, so different worries per person, was actually rather high. They also found that the worries appeared to take up significant amounts of thinking time for participants, with individual worries consuming 43% of the previous 2 hours and a quarter of the entire day on average. So what this tells us is that there are a lot of unique worries that were recorded, that they had, 43% of the previous 2 hours. That's creeping up to half of the time in the previous 2 hours was taken up thinking about this worry, and 25% of the entire day was spent worrying. And when we know the likelihood of the worries in these participants coming true was so low, I think it's really comforting and encouraging for all of us to recognise that the likelihood of the things that we are worrying about as individuals ourselves coming true is actually very, very low. And so what can we take from this research? So this kind of research really helps for us to get, I guess, a better perspective on worry when we are worrying and when we can recognise that we're doing it. But so often what happens is our minds drift off into a worry without us noticing at first. We have all of the downstream physiological changes that can make us feel sick and sweaty and shaky and distracted, and our heart's racing. We're not breathing properly. We're not concentrating. We can't recall. We can't remember. We can't take in new information. We might not sleep well. Goodness, no wonder it's so tough, hey? And I've been there, and it's not a challenge for me anymore because I've developed skills over time that have enabled me to really manage the worries that I have. I want to say this to you. If this episode has helped you to recognise that, hey, worrying is a really big part of my life, and you know now that it has the potential to take up an enormous amount of time, then I really encourage you to think about who you can talk to, make an appointment with your family doctor, and seek some help. There is help available, and your GP is a really brilliant place to start. For those of you that are curious to know a little bit more about the strategies that I practice, I'll share a little bit with you now, but also encourage you to go back to some other previous episodes where I've jumped on the microphone solo and shared more about some of the strategies to really help with worry. So here's what I do. And I'll share a personal example here with you. My dad recently had a stroke, and that's been really difficult, as you can imagine, for our family. And it's very natural when something like that happens to have a lot of thoughts and a lot of worries about what is this going to mean for him, for my mum, for his quality of life, for her quality of life, for the future, for independence, for driving, and for so many things. Like the cascade of worries is real, okay? And whilst we're very thankful that the stroke hasn't affected his cognitive functioning, he can think and remember and talk and speak, and he has upper body strength, it significantly impacted his ability to walk. So he's bedridden at the moment. Whilst I don't worry obsessively like I once did, I've had a lot of worries on my mind lately, and here's what I do. I firstly recognise the thoughts that I'm having, and mindfulness in my life is a daily practice in lots of small moments. And so through that training, I'm able to recognise when I'm caught in a worry loop. And so I'll say to myself, I'm having the thought that Dad will never drive again. And the downstream kind of implications of that are many, particularly because he absolutely loves driving so much. And we can all probably relate to that idea of losing that kind of independence. So I'll firstly notice that I'm having the thought that Dad might never drive again. And I'll notice that I'm having the thought, and already what that does is it reduces the emotion around it. It increases the cognitive control that I have in that moment. And I can recognise that this is a factor that is outside of my control right now. And I can ask myself if that thought is helpful. All right. And the answer to that is no, it's not a helpful thought. What would be helpful would be to do whatever I was doing before that worry came up, and that could be work, it could be podcasting, it could be in a conversation, it could be preparing a meal at home, chatting to one of my kids, doing homework with them, or chatting with a friend at the gym. Return my attention, shine the spotlight of my attention back onto what I'm doing in the moment. Re-engage in what I can do in the moment. So just to repeat that thought process, and my mindfulness practice really enables me to have the skills to do this. So I'll notice that I'm caught up in a worry, I'm worrying about something. I'll almost kind of metaphorically step back and I'll say, I notice I'm having the thought, and then I'll repeat the thought. And I can immediately just say, hey, Jodes, is this helpful right now? And the answer is usually no. All right. And so then I can return my attention back to what I can control in that moment, which is what I was doing. Now, it doesn't mean to say that the concern about him being able to drive again doesn't change what we do. We have him in a rehabilitation facility. I'm visiting him every day, and he's getting therapy every day, and things are in place to really make a valuable difference to his recovery and hopefully enable him to be able to drive again. But when I'm worrying about it, day to day, those worries pop up, and they are distracting, they're distressing, and they're interfering with what I'm doing. And these are the strategies that I use to kind of get a handle on it and to be able to get back to what I'm doing. And so I wanted to bring this research to your attention. I'm going to leave it there for today. It's just a shorter episode than normal, but I really just wanted to remind you that in this research that was done so beautifully by the Pennsylvania State University research team, that of all of the worries in the group that were participating in this research, we can roughly say that 9 out of 10 never came true. Of the 1 out of 10 that did come true, a third of those had a better outcome than predicted. So I think we can safely say, if we extrapolate these findings to us as individuals and to the people that we work with, it's really, I think, powerful to remember that the likelihood of what we're worrying about coming true is small. If it does come true, we deal with it. We focus on what we can control. We acknowledge how it's impacting us. We use our mindfulness skills to be able to come back into our body and to be able to ground our nervous system. And we still need to do what's really important in life and be able to move forward even when things are really difficult and very, very distressing, as they are for many of you listening at the moment. So I just really want to give a shout out to anyone out there who's a worrywart or who worries a lot. I don't want you to take this research and say to yourself, or berate yourself for worrying, or say to yourself, don't worry, or say to other people, don't worry, worries don't come true. I just want you to have this understanding that the likelihood of a worry coming true is low. And when the worries pop up, the strategy of noticing and recognizing that you're having a worrying thought, noticing and naming the worrying thought and asking yourself if it's helpful, that is the strategy I want you to put in place. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for joining me for another episode. I am loving the reviews. Do you know what? I listen to podcasts that I love, and I realize I haven't been rating and reviewing as much lately. And I wonder if you are enjoying this podcast, if it's helping you, if you're sharing it. When you rate and review a podcast, it actually helps people like me who are podcasters know that we are making a difference. But it also helps when it goes to asking people with a bigger profile to join us here on our podcasts. And so when they can see that we've got more ratings and more reviews that are really positive, it really helps to kind of grow the show. And it also helps other listeners in the sea of podcasts to know that this is a trusted podcast and this is a place where you've got authenticity, you've got integrity, there's trust, and a podcast host that genuinely cares about their listeners. That is me. That is all from me today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will be back with you for another brand new episode again next week. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.